On to our top focus at this hour. North Korea has said that it successfully tested a hydrogen bomb today. The hydrogen bomb has been designed to be mounted on an intercontinental ballistic missile. According to the country's state TV, the test marks a meaningful step in completing the country's nuclear weapons program.
대륙간 탄도로켓 장착용 수소탄 시험에서 완전 성공! 우리의 핵과학자들은 9월 3일 12시 우리나라 북부 핵시험장에서 대륙간 탄도로켓 장착용 수소탄 시험을 성공적으로 단행하였다.
The announcement came a few hours after two earthquakes were recorded from North Korea close to its nuclear test site. Suspecting the tremors to be an after effect of a nuclear test at that time, South Korea immediately called for a national security meeting. This is North Korea's first nuclear test after US President Donald Trump took office. Few hours before the test, the US President spoke to Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe discussing the escalating tensions in the region after some pictures were released of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un inspecting the hydrogen bomb. Meanwhile, Japan also condemned the latest missile test. Listen in.
国際社会の度重なる警告を無視して北朝鮮が核実験を強行しました。我が国は断じて容認できません。米国、韓国に加えて中国、ロシアをはじめとする国際社会と連携して断固たる対応を取ってまいります。
Let's go straight across to our special guest joining us on this edition, Lassina Zerbo, Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. Very good evening and thank you for speaking with us here on WION. First up, what's the consensus on North Korea after that crucial meeting?
I mean, the consensus is unanimous condemnation of, once again, the DPRK, North Korea, defying the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and then going against all adhered to a nuclear test moratorium and Security Council resolution.
It's very important to also highlight for us what the significance of this new bomb really is. How deadly is this new bomb that's been tested by North Korea? If you can explain to those uninitiated.
If we take it from that North Korea started testing from 2006 and then 11 years later they're still testing. Let's first say that they've been testing every 3 years. And then in 2016 they've had two tests and then now a more larger event in terms of magnitude. A larger event because we talk about 5.1 body wave magnitude and now 5.9. Monitoring system in Vienna. This is an indication that the nuclear weapon program, if this test is confirmed, is going increasingly, and then they've taken it to a serious and a different level than what we've seen so far. And that's very concerning.
All right. What's also concerning is the possibility of whether North Korea can actually miniaturize the bomb and mount it on an intercontinental ballistic missile. Is that a possibility? Is that something that is possible?
I think not that this is part of our detection capability, but if we put together what they've been doing, they've been moving from ballistic missile tests to subsequent nuclear test explosion. If you put those two together, they're putting together the mean to develop the weapon and then the mean to transport the weapon. So this is quite concerning.
Sir, let's face it, there have been sanctions by the United Nations, strong sanctions imposed there, strong condemnation coming in from the world over. With little impact, to say the least, on North Korea or no impact really on reining in North Korea. What is your organization hopeful of now?
I mean, my organization, the best hope is that we have this treaty into force.
Yes.
Because right now we have an international monitoring system and the verification mechanism that is put in place to serve a treaty that is yet to enter into force. With a treaty in force, there's no room for nuclear test explosion. With a treaty in force, any violation to the treaty will have a mechanism to enforce that law through the Executive Council of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. What we hope is that the 8 remaining countries will come together and then consider the ratification of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty that will lead to the entry into force of the CTBT. But first of all, call upon the DPRK to adhere to moratorium on nuclear testing, and that we can see the way forward, the best way for the international community, and then to save our planet from a nuclear catastrophe.
Indeed. Let's also take a step back and assess whether or not, and to your mind, have the US and other powers done enough to engage with North Korea so far?
Have they done enough? I think through the Security Council, you mentioned sanction, but as the sanctions go increasingly, constrained, we still see North Korea going with nuclear test explosion and then ballistic missile. Are the sanctions being effective? That's a question to the international community. But having said this, it is important that any issue regarding the Korean Peninsula includes the entry into force of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and the DPRK, North Korea adhering to that moratorium and considering the signature and ratification of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty.
All right, hold on to that thought, please. Let's also get in Glenn Carl from the U.S. on to the discussion. Glenn, I don't know to what extent you've been listening in to the remarks being made by the CTBTO Executive Secretary there, but the fact remains that there is a hope, a strong hope, that this latest provocation from North Korea could serve as a catalyst for that treaty to come into force.
Unfortunately, I did miss all but the last few seconds of the comments, although I found them interesting and insightful. A catalyst, I would be, well, we can all hope, but I would be skeptical of that. I think the likely course is going to be what we've lived for the past 15 to 20 years, which is that the one country that has some reasonable leverage is China, and China doesn't want North Korea to have nuclear weapons, but is unwilling to take the steps for understandable reasons that would actually pressure North Korea enough to at least consider a change. And so the likely course is that North Korea will continue, and the United States will continue to say that it's unacceptable.
I unfortunately lost that line there with Glenn Carl. We'll just reconnect with him. But Lassina is still with us. So also, is this a hydrogen explosion as North Korea claims? Because whether or not, as you just pointed out, it has the potential of being mounted on an ICBM remains under the realm of speculation. But is this a hydrogen explosion? Can that be confirmed?
I would go by saying that whether it's a hydrogen or not, what we care about is the fact that it could be, and if verified, a nuclear test explosion.
Right.
So a hydrogen is a different level of development of a nuclear weapon, and then a completely different magnitude and power as a whole. But if we take from 2006 to today, 2017, we can see an increasingly improvement of the nuclear test explosion announced or not announced by the DPRK. So we've reached a level where we can consider that they've seriously advanced their weapon program, because we're talking about a much larger explosion than the previous one. And this is what the physics of the event can tell us today.
All right, just hold on to that thought. We do have Glenn back on the line with us. Glenn, as we've been discussing whether or not the United States and other world powers have actually done enough to engage with North Korea so far is debatable. But I want to ask you this. Can or should the world rely on China, if at all, to bring Pyongyang to the negotiating table?
Well, I don't know whether we should. We have no choice. The only points of leverage, really, that exist are China has potentially some meaningful leverage because of the economic ties and support that China offers to North Korea. The United States, South Korea, and then theoretically Japan or other countries would have military leverage, but the consequences for that would be catastrophic for all involved. And so it's very doubtful that the military option is a real one, or should be a real one. Do enough? Can we rely on China? There's no other option to take, really, beyond international opprobrium and isolation, which is the case, and offering carrots, which there you say, has the United States or China done enough? And perhaps you could say no, although under President Clinton and even under President Obama and Bush, the United States has attempted, I think quite sincerely, to engage and say we can help North Korea and bring North Korea into a normal status of where it will benefit from economic aid and trade and so on. And North Korea has continued its programs anyway. There was one case, one moment 15 years ago when the change of administration from Clinton to Bush had the U.S. step back and contribute to undoing what seemed to be a partially successful negotiation. But there's not much more that one can do. So China is sort of the only card to play almost.
Lassina, is that unfortunate that the only option is to rely on China?
But I think, I'm sure if you ask the Chinese, they would tell you that it doesn't rely only on them. I think the international community as a whole has a party to play here. I don't think it's one country to another country. It's a responsibility of the international community and the UN General Assembly and the Security Council to work into finding a solution as soon as possible to this issue. Right. We've been increasingly moving from 2006, whereby many experts has called upon the international community to do its best to stop North Korea from going to further testing. And I think the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty as a moratorium and as a mechanism to get this treaty into force should be part of the discussion in the Korean Peninsula.
Listen, I also want to ask you, and for the benefit of our viewers, to elaborate on the exact nature of what we know so far was a hydrogen bomb. What exactly was the nature of that test that was carried out?
I mean, the nature of that test, I think the international monitoring system doesn't make a difference in terms of the technical specification that we provide for our member state, whether it's a hydrogen bomb or not. What we do, it's a magnitude of the event that could be an indication for the national technical means of our state to draw conclusion whether it's an hydrogen bomb or not. What we can testify today is that the physics of the event is telling us that this event is much larger than the one in 2016 and then the ones before, an indication that they're going increasingly in terms of power of the explosives and so on. And this is what we can testify today, and that can be an element for the national technical means of our sixth signatory to take into account.
Glenn, we've seen those tweets put out by US President Donald Trump just a short while back. Yet again, a strong condemnation of that test. But apart from these condemnations, what else do we expect to be in store from the US President over the next few days or weeks, given the fact that we have for the longest time discussed how the US seems to be running out of options when it comes to reining in North Korea?
Well, the United States has run out of options, whether Trump is there tweeting, silent, shouting or not. And Trump is confronting, the reality of coming in contact with Trump's mouth, or the other way around. And his mouth doesn't have much, doesn't change any reality. This is a disturbing prospect that he's only now discovering that simply making strong denunciations are largely is just empty and in fact inflammatory and dangerous. The options the United States have always been known, and they are few. I share our colleagues' strong support for international institutions and the need for them to play a role in the international community. But absent the potential of coercion, you have to have some stick. There has to be some police power potential in an international circumstance, just as in a domestic one, for parties to any sort of contract or circumstance to be either compelled or induced to obey. Otherwise, people will simply do what they wish. And there are few that one can bring to bear on North Korea. The military option is hideous and almost inconceivable. China has sound reasons to try to manage North Korea so that it remains stable. And short of that, the international community can, other than that, the international community can denounce and pass sanctions, which have some minor effect. The United States has offered on the other side, as has South Korea and Japan and China, strong inducements for cooperation, which would be quite dramatic for the lives and the stability of the North Korean population and state. And North Korea continues to think that its existence is defined by and guaranteed by this nuclear program, and we are at an impasse.
Right, Glenn, stay with us. One quick closing remark also from Lassina. You've seen the kind of reaction that have been coming in from across the world community. You've also listened to that summary given out by Glenn of where each country stands in its response. But having said that, what do you make of those reactions coming from an organization which has for the longest time been propagating that the CTBT should come into force? Are you disappointed? Are you surprised? Or do you feel that all of these developments have been along expected lines?
I think I tend to go with the line that I'm disappointed. Disappointed as head of the organization that this treaty, which entry into force was expected to be within 2 to 3 years, has been pending for over 20 years. And having said this, I'm proud of the international monitoring system that we put together and the verification mechanism in the build-up. To be a deterrent. Probably it is because this international monitoring system exists that we only see one country, only one in the 21st century. If we didn't have that international monitoring system as a deterrent, we could have been in a situation where more countries would be in a situation where they wish or want to develop nuclear weapon capabilities. Having said this, I tend to agree with Glenn, who mentioned the carrot and the stick. He's mentioning coercive diplomacy here, and that's what multilateral fora are for. And then we're hoping that the international community will find the best way to bring that stick that goes with the carrot that we've been showing, the international community has been showing so far. It is about time that this treaty enters into force. It is about time that we acknowledge that the international monitoring system and the verification mechanisms are there to serve the treaty in the interest of the international community and in the interest of coercive diplomacy too.